back to We Do the Heavy Lifting. I'm your host, Dr. Jenny Yentis, and today we do firefighting. Now, we've had a few episodes in the past on firefighting, and you might see a theme there. It's because here at Huffines, we do quite a bit with the fire service. We've been doing cardiovascular health profiles for firefighters since 1996. So we have quite a history with the fire service. But today we're going to talk about even more exciting things happening in the fire service. And our guest today is Annette Zapp. Now, you are a certified strength and conditioning specialist and a certified sports nutritionist. You were once a biochemist, but now you've been in the fire, you were in the fire service for 20 plus years, and you just retired, and now you're starting a PhD. I am so excited. I'm so excited right now.
Me too.
If you have not been following Annette on social media, you must. Very fun, very fun. And you've always had a passion for translating research into the application. And so you communicate that through your podcast, which is Fire Rescue Wellness. So tell us a little bit about what's going on. I mean, you just retired and now you're starting a new path. I'm really interested.
You know what, the best way I can explain it, Jenna, is I am a biochemist by degree. Mm-hmm. I'm a strength and conditioning specialist and a nutritionist by credential.
Okay.
I'm a firefighter by trade, and I'm a business owner by choice. And the reason I started Fire Rescue Wellness is that I saw in the fire service a huge hole. Okay. Men and women raise their right hand and they swear to protect lives and property, but no one ever swears to protect them. And so I, through my business, Fire Rescue Wellness, provide education and coaching and counseling and all of the things that the firefighters need, but they don't get enough of.
That is so true. I've never really thought about that, but the public could do a much better job of protecting our first responders, especially firefighters. Daughter of a firefighter, I can say that.
Yes,
that is.
Yes, there's so many risk factors with firefighting that people don't even think about.
Yeah.
The top 4 killers of our firefighters, which your listeners may be shocked about, are suicide, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and then accidents, whether those are industrial accidents or motor vehicle accidents or something like that. But firefighters are losing their lives, not in the way that your listeners are probably assuming that they are. And there's so many things we can do for them.
So I just want to ask about that. So the public view, and I'm just going to make a huge generalization here, is that firefighters just go in, and a lot of times people call them heroes because they do life-saving tasks every
interventions,
day.
if you will.
Interventions. I'm trying to think of the right word. And so they probably don't think of it much outside of that. And so they probably don't think about how much their community budget is dedicated to fire service and how much it's dedicated to protecting those individuals. And so I think it's really important for us to think through those types of issues.
Well, and I can put this in perspective for your listeners. The operating budget of my fire department, now I'm a fire protection district, which is a little bit different than a municipal fire department. In a municipal fire department, the city or the village oversees the entire budget, and the police department and the fire department and public works and the library all have to sort of fight for their piece of the pie.
Okay.
In a fire protection district, we are a line item on your tax bill.
Oh, nice.
So that money goes to the fire protection district. But it's really interesting. The vast majority of that money, although it is spent on salaries and benefits, there is very little money allocated for taking care of the firefighters. We spend several $1 million on a fire rig and subsequently spend a lot of money taking care of that fire rig because it's a huge investment. But I like to say if we spent $2.2 million on a ladder truck, they're going to spend $2.2 million on me throughout my career, in my 20-year career, and very little investment into my health and wellness.
And preventative, like if you could start earlier, if you could start with prevention earlier, prevention of an injury, prevention of some of the cancers, it's due to exposure, right?
Yes.
Suicide, you said, is one of the top ways in which we're losing firefighters. So interventions for counseling or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's putting money towards those
Well,
areas.
we just assume, the administration and the public assumes that firefighters are some sort of special subpopulation, some sort of superhero that doesn't need the same care that a quote unquote normal person needs. But I would argue we probably need better care because our sleeping conditions are worse. Our nutrition can be worse. Our stress can certainly be way worse. And so we really need to. The other thing I say with my analogy is that ladder truck for $2.4 or $2.2 million is a depreciating investment, whereas I am an appreciating investment. So it actually makes more sense to invest money in me than the ladder truck.
That makes a lot of sense. It's too much common sense in that.
Sometimes I make sense.
So we've talked about a little bit about some of the issues that our firefighters are facing. They have physical, emotional, mental outcomes that some are good, some are not so great. So could you highlight maybe one or two of those that people probably don't think of on a regular basis? You highlighted, the ways in which we're losing firefighters, but are there other outcomes that people aren't aware of?
Well, in terms of medical outcomes, in addition to the mental health challenges, in addition to the cancer and cardiovascular disease, diabetes type 2 is very prevalent in the fire service, probably because we don't eat as well as we should, we don't exercise as much as we should, but also that sleep deprivation plays right into that. And I like to tell the firefighters that sleep deprivation is an independent risk factor for those top 4 killers, as well as decreasing testosterone and all kinds of outcomes that they might not even be thinking of. And so in terms of awareness for the firefighters, I like to put it in this order. They're all upstream interventions, but I think sleep is the most upstream because once you're sleeping better, everything gets better. But I say sleep, nutrition, mental health activities, whether that's counseling, whether that's journaling, meditating, whatever that looks like for you, paying attention to your mental health. And then the last one, which you're going to be surprised because I'm a strength and conditioning coach, exercise I put actually last. It's still important, it's still upstream, but those are the 4 big ways that we can help our firefighters. And the fire service is very fond of the whole train the trainer concept. So they would like to send one person to a 40-hour class and then call that person experts and have that person come back and train everyone. But really, I've been doing this for 30 plus years and I still feel like I don't know enough. And so putting that on a firefighter, I think is a terrible idea.
That's a lot for a person to carry.
It is.
A lot. Yeah, I absolutely. And I was thinking as you were saying that, sleep, if you could get them to sleep a little bit better, then maybe some of the other pieces might start to fall into place. So what does that look like? Because a lot of firefighters have very odd schedules. Some of the listeners probably have no idea. Back when my father was a firefighter, it was 24 on, 24 off.
Oh, God.
And it was like a 10-day, and then he had 10 days where he didn't work. And so, it was, you got this little fold out piece of paper. You would go and look at the schedule. It was like a calendar and you'd be like, oh, it's red. So dad's there today. Blue, he's not, he's home.
Oh gosh.
So I don't know. Schedules are different now, but you live at the firehouse for a few days, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say most of the country is on a 24/48, but then some departments are going to a 48/96, which can be better or can be worse depending upon how busy you are. But to answer your question, I think that education is the biggest piece of it. Awareness. There have been some studies that show simply educating the fire service on, say, nutrition principles. Or Katie Emerson actually just had a study come out where during COVID, she started a Instagram account, a private Instagram account for her study group. This was not the original study's design, of course, but COVID messed everything up. But all she did was provide education with infographics, recipes, little training sessions, and just information in general. And over the 6-week course of the study, her study group lost a statistically significant amount of weight, not a clinically significant amount of weight, but just educating them made a good result. So I think the fire service is in desperate need of good education.
I think when you talk about nutrition too, it can be difficult at the fire station because a lot of times you're there to fend for yourself. You might have one firefighter that likes to cook, and so they cook, and you get your plate and you just kind of fill it, and you're kind of at the whim. So it's like, I don't know if we can even afford putting a nutritionist in the firehouses, but
well, it's Jill Joyce at Oklahoma State University did a really elegant study where she simply brought them good food, and the rules were, I will bring you this good food, and by good I mean cuties and nuts and what we would call healthier snacks.
Okay.
The rules were you have to have the healthier snacks out on the counter. You don't have to stop bringing donuts. You don't have to say no to the brownies, but they have to be put away in the cabinet. But she found, now they have a very strange schedule there, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it's a 48-96. So during their 48-hour shift, those firefighters ate about a pound more of produce than they had before, simply because it was there and it was visible, and the crap was in the cupboard.
You'd have to go looking for it. It took effort.
It's effort. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so just little things like that. But going back to we're going to send a firefighter to a 40-hour class, what they learn in 40 hours is move more, eat less, which works to some extent.
True.
But when you've got someone who's morbidly obese, there's a psychological component to it. There might be a disease process going on. And I think having someone who actually has credentials and competence to be in charge of that is a really good investment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think anybody would argue with you there. It's, prioritizing the rig over, just as you were saying, depreciating or appreciating where are you putting your money, and really just trying to shift that culture.
Agreed. And sometimes fire departments say to me, but we can't afford this. And my answer is, you can't afford not to do it.
Yeah.
Your firefighters they can be ticking time bombs, and you're asking them to do, I said they weren't superheroes, but you're asking them to do superhuman feats.
Yes.
Extremely high heart rates in a 1,000-degree oven under a lot of stress. Nothing good's going to happen when you're not fit.
Yeah.
Mentally and physically.
Is there a culture shift within the fire service to be more physically fit? I mean that being that, even law enforcement is sort of starting to realize that, the cops that eat donuts every day and that sort of thing, they struggle sometimes to meet certain demands of the job. Is there a culture shift within, would you say that that's starting to appear in the fire service?
That's an interesting question. What I'm finding, I'll answer it in a couple different ways.
Okay.
When I first started 20 years ago, the nutrition was not very good. Lots of sausages and tater tots and things like that. Bread with butter at every meal. I would say the awareness on nutrition has gotten better. So that's great. I would say the awareness that physical fitness training is important has elevated, which is great. That said, the firefighters that were coming in 20 years ago and 30 years ago they're a different breed.
Okay.
They grew up having gym class. They grew up playing outside. They grew up without a supercomputer in the palm of their hands. I call them children. The young firefighters that are coming in nowadays, they are so much more aware of nutrition and physical fitness. They're so much more interested in it. But when I do their body composition, many of them are coming in at 25, 26, 27% body fat, even though they're interested in nutrition and in fitness.
The application of it isn't always there.
Yeah. And the fact that they grew up playing video games, hanging out inside.
Yeah.
They didn't work as much as the previous generation. That's the only thing I can attribute it to.
Yeah, I think that, I think that we're seeing that across the board right now. The military is struggling to recruit because, these adolescents coming out of high school aren't physically fit enough even for boot camp.
Well,
which is crazy.
Dr. Bornstein actually says that lack of physical fitness is creating a national security crisis. We just simply do not have enough fit individuals to be in the military. But the problem is we're dipping into the same bucket. police, fire, military. That's all the same bucket. So we have a huge challenge, and we need to figure it out, and fast.
Absolutely. I think that leads me to my next question is like, how could the public better support firefighters, first responders, and those individuals? From what you're saying, like, how could we as the public better support to make sure that those outcomes, that we're having better outcomes?
I can think of a couple of things. One of them is when citizens, they want to love us. They want to show us that they appreciate us at the holidays. They want to show us that they're so happy that we saved their dad. And so they show us that by bringing us garbage.
Cookies, cakes, brownies.
Type 2 diabetes on a plate, right? Yeah. And so I think, first off, you never have to bring us anything. It truly is, it's our honor to help. But if you really feel compelled to bring something to the firehouse, some things I might suggest, a bag of cuties, bag of almonds, maybe even cold cuts and cheese, for just something a little bit better than diabetes on a plate. So that's one thing. Yep. The other thing is just to be aware. I have been questioned in the past when I used to running around the fire station in my shorts and t-shirt, doing exercises, walking lunges, and people would stop and they'd say, shouldn't you be working? Well, actually right now I'm working very hard to be ready to respond to your emergency. So I think just having the awareness that firefighters aren't naturally fit, just like no one is naturally fit, and we need to take care of ourselves. I think that's helpful. And then, I think those are the two main ones that I can think of.
Yeah, I think that those educating our public is probably something that we haven't been doing, and it shows. Well, it definitely shows.
And people just assume that firefighters are the ones that you see on the calendars.
Oh yeah, the
with the abs and the puppies.
Oh yeah.
But 80% of the fire service is overweight and obese, just like the general population. And so we just need to be aware that firefighters are chosen from the general population, and we do a really, really hard job.
Yes.
And just understanding that we're just humans. We're only humans.
And to add to that, you're doing a very hard job, but you're doing a hard job that's physical, but also mental and emotional. You see a lot more tragedy, and you see how that affects people more than the general public does, right? You're sort of, it's your job to go into those tragic events and try to help. And that stress, that emotional labor that you're carrying and doing, even myself, when I'm down and things have happened, I don't want to work out. Like, that's the last thing I don't want to eat healthy. Where is the ice cream? So I think just really noticing that those individuals, that's what they're doing, and how can you better support them? If you have a local, budget meeting, go find out how they're spending their money. Maybe if the public started asking for more interventions, our city councils would look more in that direction.
Well, and I think, you brought up a good point about it's mentally and emotionally challenging too. And back to your question about what can we do to support the firefighters, one of the things that it probably hasn't occurred to your listeners because they're probably just excited to meet a firefighter. And so the first question many people ask a firefighter is, what's the worst thing you've ever seen?
Oof.
Right? No. So when that question comes up, we have two choices. Choice one is to go through our mental Rolodex. We don't want to do that, but go through our mental Rolodex, pull something out, and absolutely horrify the person that asked the question. Choice number two is to make something up. Yeah. Oh, you know what? One time I climbed up in a tree and got a cat out, something like that. Make something up. But choice number three is what I usually choose. And that's a really hard question to ask firefighters because they have seen so many things that you couldn't even imagine, that I just think that maybe you don't even want to hear about it. And then just educate the person a little bit because they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, being a daughter of a firefighter, I don't think that's a question I would ever ask, but I've lived it, right? In a way, I've heard stories that my dad has told. I've heard funny stories that he has told, but then I've read in the paper, or seen on the news my dad having to give, you see those things, and it's like, I don't want to.
You don't want to re-see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he has to deal with that. And then for him to have to go and tell somebody, oh yeah, that's hard.
I don't know who the quote is attributed to, but it goes something like this. I wish my mind could forget what my eyes have seen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can't ever forget.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important when you start in the fire service to be prepared and have mental health interventions in place. So I tell my new guys, I need you to go find someone, try them on like a pair of pants, try them on for size, find someone you like, and then make an appointment, whether that's once a year, twice a year, once a quarter, and just go whether you need to or not. Mm-hmm. Because then when you have a crisis, it's natural. You already have someone.
Yeah.
You just go.
Yeah. No, it's really important. Very important. A lot of people could take that, even.
That's true. A lot of people could use that advice, because when you're looking for a mental health professional, when you are in the middle of a crisis, that is not a good time to be looking.
That's true. Yeah. You will pick something that you just don't. Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of like when you have to go to a Halloween party and you're looking on, say, the day of the party, and everything's picked over and you're stressed out. It's not going to go well.
That's a lovely analogy. I like that. And we're going to end there. Annette, is there anything that you'd like to leave with our listeners as a take-home message, or anything we didn't cover that you think is important to leave with them?
I think you mentioned at the very beginning, I help interpret science for the fire service, because believe me, the chiefs are probably not reading the scientific papers. Mm-hmm. But we are in the fire service where sports science was 30 years ago, which is the good stuff is being done. Yeah. It's just not getting to the coaches.
Yeah.
And so my biggest take home, I think, for your listeners is, if you can help interpret the research and the resources for the fire service, we need you. We need quality people interpreting that research.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And we are going to leave a link to your podcast and your business in our show notes.
Awesome.
Fire Rescue Wellness. And if you're looking to maybe make that move, feel free to reach out to Huffines. We are more than happy to kind of give you some direction, but we know a lot of people that have made this shift. And I'm sure Annette, if you reached out to her, she would give you some advice. Although now you're going to be doing a PhD, so you might be a little busy.
Hello, OSU. Dr. Dawes, here I come.
I'm very excited for you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for sticking with us for another episode. As always, if you have comments or a topic that you would like us to cover, feel free to email us at huffines@tamu.edu. And as always, stay healthy.